Hi everybody, it's me, Bree, finally back to you with another video. I'm sorry that it's been a couple of weeks, and if I have left you guys kind of in like a little bit of suspense. I know, once it gets towards the end of a pregnancy, the longer time goes between videos, you're kind of like, is everything okay? Everything is good. If you follow me on Instagram, then you know I delivered a healthy, happy baby. And even if you don't follow me on Instagram, then you can tell by this title that I delivered. So if you're joining me here for the very first time, hi, I'm Bree, I'm 25, I'm a very first time surrogate, a gestational carrier, which means I'm basically just an incubator. I have no biological relation to baby, but I worked with Northwest Surrogacy Center and was matched with an international family. They are same-sex couple, 2 dads, and this was their very first baby. So, I think there's a lot to update you guys with, and I'm going to try and keep this as short as possible. But the weekend that I went into labor, I was planning on getting you guys a 36-week bump date. My days of changing to the next week was a Sunday. So that weekend, I really wanted to do a 36-week bump date for you guys because I had been experiencing new symptoms, but I also I didn't know, of course, 100%, but I had a pretty good feeling that it was time and that I was getting ready to go into labor. I have a son who will be 2 in August, so I had experienced labor once before, and just kind of remembering the signs of my body's changes and things like that. It just felt like it was gonna be soon, and it was that weekend, kind of. So I delivered on Monday the 25th, so I'm about 10 days postpartum now. And let's just talk about that last week. At 36 weeks, I kind of stopped having just the Braxton Hicks contractions that I had been having, which are, for those of you who aren't super familiar, they're kind of like practice contractions. So for me, it was very obvious when I was having them. There was definitely I am definitely having Braxton Hicks right now. There was no I don't know, maybe that's Braxton Hicks, maybe that's just baby moving. For me, it was never painful, but it was definitely uncomfortable. My whole belly would get really tight, and it would kind of almost ball up. It would get rounder, more narrow on the sides, and then more round in the middle. And it would get very hard and just very tight. It was a super uncomfortable feeling. It was definitely not something that you could ignore or mistake for baby moving. Those had started to stop, and real contractions had started. So everyone's labor is different. My stepmom never had this kind of pre-labor labor that I had. I had it with my son too. Definitely shorter this time because I feel like the whole week leading up to actual delivery with my son, I was having contractions, where this was just a few days. Now, this was my second pregnancy, so they do say that your body does things a little bit faster the second time around than the first. So I was having contractions for, I think it was 3 days before I was actually in labor. And they were painful. It felt almost it felt similar to period cramps, but more severe. And they started out pretty irregular. That's kind of how you know that it's not real labor, even though they are real contractions and they are painful. They weren't super regular, and they weren't painful enough for me to go to the hospital, or for the first 2 days, I didn't even really time them. I was just kind of aware. And we did have my sister stay the night Friday night, and I was timing them. They were regular at that point, but they still weren't painful enough for me to want to go to the hospital for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to labor. The biggest reason really is I wanted to labor at home for as long as possible. I didn't want to leave my son. I have never left my son overnight before, and I've never been away from him overnight. We've never done a trip away without him. I've never really been away from him other than like for work, or maybe like an appointment or something, but the longest I've been away from him is a work day. So I wanted to stay home as long as I possibly could, be with my son, even though he was sleeping when I was laboring on Friday night. I wasn't actually laboring, but I was having contractions. When I was having them, it was late at night. He was already asleep, but I wanted to try and go to sleep. I knew I had my sister here if we needed to leave in the middle of the night, but they ended up stopping at some point in my sleep. Saturday night, I actually didn't really have contractions. I felt pretty darn good. And I don't remember this specifically with my son, but I have heard a lot of people say that like right before labor, like the day before or right before, you feel pretty dang good. And then it hits you. And that's kind of what happened this time. Saturday, I was feeling pretty darn good. I just hung out with my son and my husband, and we just enjoyed some family time. I started packing my hospital bag a little bit. Didn't finish it, but just kind of started getting some things in there. And then Sunday, I went into labor. I was 37 weeks exactly on Sunday. And I called my sister over again. She lives here in the same town as I do. I think it was 9 or 9:30 at night that my contractions started. So the very, very, very first contraction was about 9 or 9:30. And my sister came over. We left to the hospital after it had been actually a couple hours of labor, because again, I wanted to labor at home for as long as possible. So we did that, got to the hospital. They monitored me for a little while, just to make sure I was actually in labor and it wasn't false labor. I was only dilated to a 3 when I got to the hospital. So that's why they hooked me up and they were monitoring my contractions for that time. So that was all good. I now at this point, things get a little bit fuzzy for me because I wasn't on my phone. I was in labor. So I was just kind of focused on breathing through my contractions. They were like less than a minute apart, and I didn't have any pain medication at this point because they weren't sure if they would be admitting me or not. So I was in a lot of pain. I had no pain meds to make me more comfortable. I was just kind of sitting through it and breathing through it. So I think it was about 2 hours that they were monitoring me, maybe an hour and a half. They came back, and at this point I started having the shakes, which I actually got when I was dilated to 10 with my son Aiden and was ready to push. So once I got the shakes, I was like, oh gosh, yeah, for sure I'm in labor. And at that point, my nurse was like, I think we should check you again. And she checked me and she said I was at like a 4 or 5. And she's like, she literally said, oh yeah, you're staying. So at that point they admitted me, and they actually did the COVID test because among just, being a surrogate and being in labor and delivery, we are also in the middle of a pandemic. So that was interesting and a new experience. This whole time up until this point, I had been laboring through a mask, having contractions and trying to focus on my breath while wearing a mask. They didn't require that I wear it when it was just my husband Austin and I in the room, but once a nurse or a doctor, whoever it was in the room, then we had to wear the mask. And it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't the most comfortable thing either. While they were working on like getting me admitted, and they knew that I wanted an epidural, so while we were waiting for the anesthesiologist and things like that, I was just laboring, and I was at a full 5 and very shaky, very nauseous. I had thrown up, and that wasn't fun. I felt that I was going too soon, and I asked if I could just keep my mask off for a few minutes, and then I ended up throwing up. Finally, the anesthesiologist came in, did my epidural, and things felt much more comfortable there on out. So I was between first contraction to delivery, I was in labor for about 12 hours, which is a little under. I think it was like 11 hours, which is about half the time that I was in labor with Aiden, which was close to like 22 hours. So it was also nice because I only had like a 12-minute drive to this hospital because it's different insurance instead of like a 30-minute drive. So there were some benefits this time around that I didn't get to experience the first time. And pushing was like 4 minutes, and voila, we had a vaginal delivery like planned. Baby was healthy. When I delivered, he actually went to the warmer. He didn't do skin to skin with me because, I'm not mom, so I didn't want to have that kind of bonding experience. Ideally, dad would have been there. For my surrogacy, everybody's surrogacy journey is different. In my journey, I mostly communicate with one parent. I always keep both dads updated with like appointment information and all of that stuff. But actual communication is really just between one of the dads and I. He had planned on being here for the delivery. He was originally planning on being here June 1st. So I delivered on the 25th of May. He actually would have missed it anyway, but because of the pandemic, it has been difficult for him to get here. So like I said, I'm 10 days postpartum. Today is the 4th of June, and he's still not here. He lives in China. He was actually able to go to Cambodia, do a quarantine in Cambodia, and then tomorrow he will be flying here, and then it will be a little bit of a drive for him, but he'll fly in, and then he will see his baby boy for the very first time on Saturday, the 6th. He gets to meet his son. It's a really long flight from Cambodia to the US, so he's got a long flight, and then, like I said, a bit of a drive, and then he gets to meet baby boy. Baby is super good. He was a little jaundiced, but with little sunlight, he's doing really, really good. And I have been doing pretty good as well. I am having some bleeding and clotting weirdness happening. I didn't really have clots with Aiden, like really, really small ones that were normal. And by this time, when I was postpartum, I was already like going out to a restaurant. I was already like going to the mall and walking around and not really having issues. I was taking Motrin and Tylenol, and I am now too, but I wasn't having issues. Now my bleeding is inconsistent. Sometimes it's fine, and sometimes I'm bleeding through a pad really fast. And really more of the issue is the clotting. They're really large. I've had like 4 like golf ball size blood clots, and I called my doctor's office last week when the first one happened, but I missed her call, and things had kind of slowed down the next day when she called me back. So I was like, okay, she said, if things have slowed down, then it's fine. If not, then call her back. So I just kind of waited it out, and then the clots started happening. And so I do have an appointment next week at the beginning of the week. I talked to the nurse practitioner again today, and she said if anything changes, call and let them know. But I am having back pain, which she asked me, but I think it's just for my epidural. I'm still bruised and still right where I had it. It's pretty sore. I'm not having like stomach pains. I'm just having like a little bit of cramping, which is normal, but I'm not having any like foul odors down there. I'm not having like any weird discharge other than, like I said, just irregular bleeding and the blood clots, but no weird discharge, no fever, no chills. So there's not uterine infection signs. So she said, you know, if those things start happening, to give the office a call back right away. But right now, that stuff isn't happening. So I do have an appointment, like I said, at the beginning of next week. I'm just trying to rest and relax. My husband, Austin, is off this week and was off last week, just helping me to relax and recover. My mom is also in town, so between the two of them, I have a good amount of help with Aiden. He's not even quite 2 yet, and he is super active, runs around, loves to play, which is all great, except for, you know, when you just deliver a baby, you're supposed to be resting and relaxing, and it's hard to keep up with a toddler and trying to do those things. So the nurse practitioner just told me to just try and relax as much as I can. So I am taking it pretty easy. What's difficult for me is I'm not exhausted. Like, I feel pretty good. My energy is good. I don't have a newborn to take care of. So it's not like I'm up all night. So I'm getting like rest and relaxation, and I feel fine. And I want to get up and I want to go do things, especially since my mom is in town. She lives out of state. I want to go walk around somewhere, or, you know, just get out of the house and breathe some fresh air. And it's hard for me. That's that. I am pumping. I don't know if I had mentioned that in any of my other videos, but I am trying to like kind of slowly not pump. I'm trying to decrease my supply, and I was planning on just pumping as long as baby was here. Now I'm not exactly sure how long baby will be here. His dad is getting here this weekend, but there have been challenges with flying back. So baby will, obviously, they'll need his birth certificate and they'll need his passport, but I think they're just having issues because of the pandemic getting back. So my maternity leave is 6 weeks long before I'm back in the salon, and I definitely will not be pumping when I'm in the salon. I said from the very, very beginning, before I was even matched with my intended parents, that I was interested in pumping for a baby, but I would only do it when I was on my leave recovering. I would not do it when I returned back to work. I didn't have a great experience pumping when I was breastfeeding with my son. I didn't pump really very much, and I just never got that good of a hold on things. I'm doing a lot better now, but you know, I'm exclusively pumping. I'm not breastfeeding and pumping. So it's really difficult for me as a hairstylist because I don't have built-in breaks in my day. I usually take my lunch break or just a break like when a client's hair color is processing. So every single day, like depending on what my schedule is and what clients I'm seeing, my breaks are different. So it was super inconsistent with pumping. I went back after 2 months, 8 weeks, and I was still breastfeeding, but I kind of ended up, I was pumping for a little while, but then I ended up just not pumping during the day and only breastfeeding in the morning at night, and then supplementing with formula during the day when Aiden was at daycare. So I'm slowly trying to decrease my supply so that I am not just like super, super engorged and having a hard time getting back to work and dealing with this situation. So I have only pumped once today, and it is actually about 5 o'clock. So I pumped in the morning. I'm gonna go pump again right now, and then I'll probably pump right before bed, and then I won't pump anymore. So I'm slowly just trying to like decrease my supply. I started drinking some sage tea, and that's that. So that is all of my updates. Thank you guys so much for coming with me along on this surrogacy journey. I don't know if I'm going to do surrogacy again. I don't know when baby number 2 for us is going to come yet. I don't know if that will be natural or if that will be through adoption. But if you subscribe to my channel, then you will be along for all of my future updates. After I have my appointment next week, I will make sure to update you guys and let you know how I'm doing. Thanks for watching. Bye.